I have no background props or anything for today, and the shirt has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Um, Mostly because I have nothing that works for a background prop or a shirt for this. Digimon, yay. So, the character I'm going to be going over in this episode, Henry's sensei, who is his Tai Chi teacher, his martial arts teacher, his name is, according to what I found, his name is Chou. And I wanted to do a video about him because when I was going through and talking about several of the other characters, like when I talked about Henry, and then, surprisingly enough, when I talked about Impmon, there's really good scenes that come up with Sensei. And I'm just going to refer to him as Sensei because that's generally just what he gets referred to as in the series. Sensei, of course, means like teacher, in My Hero Academia, one for all or all for one is called Sensei, but also, Aizawa is called, Mr. Aizawa is called Sensei, Aizawa Sensei and such. So it's teacher. And I think I was introduced to that concept probably in this one in Digimon, in all honesty, for the fact of, Henry calls his teacher that. I wanted to do this video because this Sensei Chou represents kind of this human character that he does not have a Digimon. None of his actual children have Digimon because, yes, he is connected to Henry and the fact that he is Henry's teacher and that Henry asks him for advice about stuff when it comes to some of the other Digimon issues that they have to deal with, because he's a very philosophical man and stuff like that. And he's very wise and has very interesting views on how good and evil can be perceived, which I'm going to talk about. And he is also this character that is just kind of he accepts the fact that there are Digimon, because you see that when it comes to Impmon, much later on in the series. And he's not in a huge number of episodes. I think he's in maybe 5 episodes at the most, if that, but he does actually have this impact on the series and how his relationship with Henry and how his advice to Henry kind of affects the way that Henry acts at times and things like that. And that's why I wanted to talk about him a little bit more, is just he pops up here and he pops up here. I wanted to do something where I actually highlight him, kind of like what I did with Mrs. Asagi, with the teacher. We're kind of first introduced to him sometime near the beginning of the series when we see Henry at his Tai Chi class. We also know that Henry's father does Tai Chi as well. But Henry's teacher is, Joe. Sorry. I think it is supposed to be a Chinese name, but I just don't know how to pronounce it because they never actually say his name in the series as far as I'm aware. They just all call him Sensei. And, we have him there teaching Henry. And what ends up happening is he points out the fact that he thinks that Henry is distracted during their training. And he's like, yeah, there's just stuff going on and everything. And Henry actually ends up kind of asking him what he knows about the Devas. And the way that Sensei explains it is that Sensei explains it is that, well, the Devas were these pieces of legend, that they were these 12 good spirits who battled against the demon Ashura and his followers. And that is generally the way that they are depicted in either Chinese or Japanese mythology, which I know sometimes those have similar roots, but I know that they're not the exact same thing. I don't know a whole lot about Chinese and Japanese mythology. I'm sorry. But, that there are these followers, these 12 good spirits that fight against the demons from Ashura. Zorro reference, anybody? Admittedly, seeing Zorro fight a bunch of different Digimon would be very entertaining. It's like, I don't know if any of, well, there are some Digimon that like alcohol, so I guess maybe he would be interested in hanging out with them afterwards, but, moving on. Um, what would Zoro's Digimon be? I have no idea. Like, I don't know. That would be an interesting video. What Digimon would the Straw Hats have? I don't know, and I don't think it's one that I want to find out. But he says that, they're good spirits that fight against the bad. And Henry kind of takes this as, well, at this point in time, they're already dealing with the Devas. Several of them have already attacked, and they've used the name of, like, I'm, a Deva of this, and, blah, 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 blah. And, so, of course, the way that this comes across is, from the audience perspective, is generally like, okay, well, these Digimon showed up and they started attacking us. Same thing with the kids. It's like, well, they started attacking us and trying to, like, take Calamon and, hurt our Digimon. And, so are they bad? They keep causing all these problems and everything. We, of course, find out later that, the Devas were sent by Chou in order to try to get Calamon back, so that way they can use Calamon's power as the catalyst to digivolve to Mega, so that way they can fight against the D-Reaper. Yes, it caused a lot of destruction in the process of trying to get to Calamon, and it's not like Calamon willingly wanted to go, but it's kind of like I don't remember if I said this specifically when I talked about Chou, when I talked about the Sovereign Digimon, but it's just like, you could have just asked. And if you explained what happened and explained what was going on with the D-Reaper and everything, I'm quite certain that Calamon would have been perfectly fine with returning to the digital world with you for however much amount of time, helping with that, and then going back to the real world or having the kids come with them. I'm quite certain that would have been done. But of course, you have to have like an antagonist set up in the series, and that's kind of what the Devas represent for like the secondary tier of antagonists before you kind of have to deal with Chou, and then there's like, oh no, there was a misunderstanding. Which, the way that Sensei kind of says it is that later on, or at some point in time when he's talking to Henry, when it comes to like the concepts of like good and evil and bad and truth and stuff like that, he's like, well, a change in perspective can make good appear evil and evil seem good, which is a very good representation of the Devas, and the fact that like what the Devas are trying to do, as far as they're aware, pretty much, humans just want to cause harm to the digital world. They were sent there by their sovereign, their god, in order to try to get Calamon, and, and try to stop the humans, or whatever the case may be, so that way the humans can't destroy the digital world. Whereas from, Henry and the other Tamers' perspective, they showed up and they're causing problems. And then, of course, they find out later on that, well, maybe there was a bit of an overreaction on both sides. But Sensei kind of points this out in the beginning that, like, from certain perspectives, like, depending on what side you're on, people look good and people look evil depending on what side you're on. And if you flip that, the opposite is true too, where the people that are good are actually bad, and the people who are bad are actually good. And this is demonstrated a whole lot around the world in different types of conflicts and things like that. Sometimes the good ones are much more apparent than the bad ones, and sometimes the bad are much more apparent than the good. But Sensei points this out to Henry, and he explains it like, well, the followers of Ashura thought that the Devas were evil, and that good and evil can, change definition based on one's perspective. And, comparing them to him. I love this comparison that he makes, because he does like these great philosophical things, and then he'll break it down into something very simple. And he's like, it's like eating an entire gallon of ice cream. It's like, it seems like a good idea at first, but then by the time you're done, you're like, oh, good God, why did I do that? I'm like, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been times in everybody's life that I ate way too much ice cream, or I ate way too much cake, or some combination of too much sweets or too much food in general. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Probably wasn't. And, he makes that comparison. But also, like, I'm quite sure there's like a brain freeze factor going on there as well. But it's like, I like how they do this comparison. I don't remember if any of the other, like if Takato or Rika ever meet Sensei. I don't remember if they do or not. That's not something that I think ever comes up in the series. But like, Sensei represents this person that Henry goes to for advice. And yes, Henry goes to his dad for advice at times. And even throughout the course of the series, I think he goes to his mom for advice at various points in time. But he sees Sensei as this person who can help him understand some of the things that maybe his father has a different perspective on, which is already a good way of like going and finding a different perspective on an issue that's going on. So we have that there. Also, it is explained at some point in time at the beginning of the story by Henry when he's like talking to Terriermon at some point in time, or when we get like Henry's a little bit of his additional backstory. He said that like when he was a kid and he started learning, Tai Chi and the martial arts and stuff like that he knows. I think they also call it like Taekwondo in the series, but again, they may have called it one and one and a different one. So I don't know. One of the things that ends up happening is that Henry says that like, he's like remembering stuff. He's like, when I was a kid, I used this power that I had as like, these martial arts skills that I had to like beat someone up. And, it's implied that the reason that Henry started doing the martial arts is because he wanted to learn how to control his temper and control his anger, which is a reason a lot of people tend to do different types of martial arts and stuff like that, because it gives them an outlet for that. And in that course of that relationship that he built with his sensei, Henry obviously trusts his sensei a lot and values his opinion on different things, hence why he asks him about stuff and wants to get his opinion about like, oh, well, this, what do you know about the Devas or stuff like that, without actually revealing what's going on with the Digimon. By the way, nowadays, if Digimon Tamers was happening like nowadays, the instant any type of Digimon thing would like show up, it would get recorded on someone's cell phone, and they would be like, it would be all over the world in a matter of minutes. Type of a thing. So yeah, there's that. Just like, yeah, it would be pretty much known pretty quickly if there were Digimon roaming around. But later on, after Henry travels to the digital world with the other Tamers, and then when they return to Earth, he kind of like confirms with his sensei that like, what you said before about the Devas was that yeah, they weren't evil. They believed that what they were doing was the right thing to do in regards to trying to get Calamon, or trying to stop, the humans' advancement when it comes to being able to destroy the Digimon with their different technology and stuff like that, with like what Hypnos was doing with Yggdrasil, and with, Juggernaut and everything like that they were trying to protect themselves. It was a form of self-preservation in what they were trying to do. And I went over a whole lot of that with Yamaki, and how his perspective changes quite a bit throughout the course of the series, and how he views the Digimon and the Tamers and everything. And, Henry says to Sensei, you were right. And Sensei makes this comparison to clouds. And kind of the quote is, the conversation goes, it's like clouds. Clouds? What do we know about clouds? They're cumulus? True, but they also move between us and the sun, creating areas of shadow, and as the clouds move, they move the shadows with them. And the dark becomes the light, and the light becomes the dark. So, it is with the perception of truth. And Henry's like, so you can know what's true, or do you just have to trust that what you're doing is right? And that is kind of one of those philosophical things that can get brought up in anime that you don't expect to see coming up in a children's show that happens with Digimon and stuff like that. That's like a perspective that it's like you throw that at like a 10-year-old and they're like, what? Why are we talking about clouds? Go back to the fighting animals. but it's something that, that can last a lot longer. Like, you watch it later on when you're an adult, or even when you're a teenager, and when you're like, I didn't consider that. It's like, yeah, I remember that, but that wasn't something that I thought about. And during the time frame that the D Reaper is invading, Henry's mother and siblings and him actually end up staying with his sensei at his sensei's house, because it's in a much safer area for them to be in. And this is when Henry has this conversation with his, sensei, and he's telling his sensei about the digital world. It's like, we saw all these different layers within the digital world, all these different, cultures and stuff like that in the digital world. And yes, there are conflicts between the Digimon that we see happen throughout the digital world, and even conflicts among the different sovereigns with the way that Chichaomon wanted to handle things, as opposed to the way that Zulongmon wanted to handle things, as opposed to, the other ones. And let the bus go by. We had a very, very noisy motorcycle out here the other day, like going up the street, and then like 20 minutes later going back down the street. And I'm just like, seriously, like, very loud. Ugh. And, so I like the fact that Henry's sensei is trying, that Henry and his sensei, like, Henry kind of confirms to his sensei that, like, yeah, your concept of, like, the way that the way that good can represent, and, the way that good can appear good, and the way that evil can appear evil, and then they can flip depending on what's going on. And, it's like humanity and Digimon as a whole, in both cases, are not entirely good, and they're not entirely evil. There's ones that are good in them, and there's ones that are bad in them. And Henry Sensei is kind of like trying to show that, trying to help Henry understand that. And I honestly think that, like, Sensei and Rika's mom, or Rika's grandma, would actually get along really well in that regard, because Rika's grandma also has quite a few different good phrases and good advice and stuff like that she gives to Rika throughout the course of the series. So I kind of like that. I think that they would get along. I have no idea if they actually end up meeting at any point in time, because I don't think that Henry Sensei is there when the kids return from the digital world. I don't remember him being there in the crowd or anything like that. All the kids' parents are there, but they're Sensei's not there. As I said, Henry's family kind of stays with Sensei during this. Well, him and his mother and his siblings stay there, because his father's pretty much just like staying with the Hypnos, staying at Hypnos and trying to work with all of that stuff, and trying to help Yamaki and everything and the other monster makers, and trying to figure out all of that stuff, which is perfectly understandable, because he's like, well, technically some of this that happened is our fault, so we're working on trying to fix it now. But then we have what is just literally one of my favorite scenes in all of Digimon Tamers for various reasons. And I talked about this scene several times, or when I talked about it in the Impmon video, which is just kind of like highlights exactly what I was trying to show about what I'm trying to show about Sensei in this, is that when Impmon, after all the kids have returned from the digital world, and Impmon's there, and he's, there's no one there to greet him, and he ends up finding his way to Ai and Mako's house, and he finds this note, this message that, is telling, Impmon where Ai and Mako are, and it has, like, his face on it, but he can't read it, so he's going out into the street, and he's trying to find someone that can read it to him, but he's being Impmon, so he's not being, the most polite about stuff, but, yeah, that's just the way that that's just his attitude about things. And he runs into Sensei, and Sensei is just like looking at him like, well, what can I help you with? Like, he just like walks up to Impmon, like, after everybody else, like, in the crowd or whatever, just kind of like ran away. And Impmon is there. Sensei just walks up and he's like, well, what can I help you with? And he's like, can you read this? And he like shows him the sign, and Sensei like reads the sign and was like, Impmon, we're at our grandma's house in whatever place, I don't remember exactly what it is. And come find us when when you get this, love, IE and Mako. And Itmon's like, well, I don't know where that is. Like, Sensei just goes, okay, so you get on the train and you ride it for 3 stops, and then you get off, and then you're in whatever the Hondo or whatever the name of the prefecture is, and that's where and that's where they'll be. And Itmon's like, okay, and then he like stops and he looks back at him, looks back at Sensei, and he's like, why did you help me? And Itmon has no frame of reference for who Sensei is. He does not know that he is Henry Sensei, that he has at least some interaction with Digimon at this point in time. This is just some random human that walked up to him on the street and helped him when all these other humans were just running away from him. Admittedly, I'd be a little bit apprehensive if like Digimon showed up and started asking questions, but like Itmon can pass as like a child in a costume. But it would be that type of thing. But like I would be a little bit apprehensive depending on like if a Digimon showed up or not. But I would also be like, okay, why is this happening in the first place? But Sensei just, and whether this is because like he's seen Terriermon and Lopmon at this point in time, he's talked with Henry about Digimon at this point in time. I think that even if Sensei did not have this connection to Henry, he would still go up to Itmon and he would still help Itmon in regards to like reading the note and telling him how to get to where IE and Mako are. And Sensei says, I have the full quote in the Itmon video. It's like, he says, oh, it's not your outer appearance that shows who you really are. It's how you're, it's what's on the inside type of a thing. And the fact, him saying that actually ends up affecting Itmon later on because of that is kind of what gives him some of the confidence to be able to go later on and help try to save Jerry, to help the Tamers when it comes to fighting against the D-Reaper and helping try to save Jerry, is because he wants to prove that he is good. That like this random dude showed up and he helped me, and he wasn't scared of me or whatever. And Itmon ends up proving that like he can be good, that like he can make his his outside match his inside and make himself be good. And we see that later on with him turning into Beelzemon with the wings and everything, that he's able to use that. And like I just like. We never get any other information about what happens with Sensei. He doesn't pop up in either of the movies. So we never get like a thing later on where he's like, oh, he's doing fine. It's fine. He's okay. Blah, 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 blah. We don't get any of that. We get nothing else. My personal headcanon is just that like, he continues to be Henry's teacher. Maybe he ends up meeting some of the kids' parents at that point in time. I just had the odd thought of like, well, I guess he could date Rika's grandma, but I'm like, nah, I don't see that happening. Like, he maybe gets to see Terriermon when, Henry is able to bring Terriermon to his, lessons and everything like that once the kids get their Digimon back and everything. It's just like, that's just my headcanon that he just like, okay. And then like at some point in time, he ends up meeting Itmon again. And Itmon's like for some reason, there's something going on. And like, he's there for, I don't know, some type of big celebration or whatever. And like, Itmon's there as well. And he's like, hey, wait a second. I remember you. You gave me directions. And he's like, yes. And were they helpful? It's like, just points at IE and Mako. Yeah, it was fine. I found them. We're good. He's like, good. It's just like, I could just picture that. I could just picture that happening. Like, he just, like, sees Itmon again. He's like, hey, were you able to help find your friends? Yeah. Good. I'm glad I could have helped. And then he just, like, walks off or whatever. But, like, that's just headcanon that I have. Like, at some point in time, he does find out that Itmon was perfectly fine, and he found IE and Mako and everything. And, he, like, still sees Henry and his friends and everything. But yeah, I wanted to talk about him because he is this representation of like an adult in the human world that is, yeah, he has this connection to the Digimon through Henry, but even if he didn't have that connection to Henry, like if Henry was not his student, and like he knew that like Digimon aren't all bad, I still think he would have just walked up and helped Ipmon anyway, because it just seems like the kind of guy that Sensei is. And that just blows my mind in that regard, because we see other humans that just like run away from the Digimon. And to be honest, depending on the Digimon, I don't blame them. I would probably run away from a lot of them too if they showed up and started causing problems. If they seem nice and gentle, I'd probably try to be like their friend or something. But like, if they're causing problems, like if they're throwing fireballs at people or if they're trying to attack people, I'd be a little bit more wary. But Itmon was not doing that at that point in time. He was just trying to get someone to read him the sign, read him the note, so he could go and find his friends, go and find his eventually revealed tamers. But so there's a lot that happens there, but I still think that Sensei would have gone and helped him. And then he would have just gone on with his day and been like, okay, well, I helped him. What else can I do now? And that just blows my mind. It was just like, now that I'm older, I'm like, that just blows my mind in that regard of just like, he just helped Impmon. That was just like one of the things that I just loved about him so much. And like, yeah, I love his way of like advice, like ice cream and clouds and that type of stuff. And I'm just like, okay, I guess that works. But that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching. I know I rambled a little bit in there. But hey, these are my videos. I ramble. This is what happens. So I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.